Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do.
But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that
guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
Lezak is closing a little bit. Can the veteran chase him down and pull off a shocker here? Here comes Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players past and present. Hey there, folks. It's me, one of your hosts, James, alongside a guy who's going to smash the French, because that's what he came here for.
It's the only reason we're here. We're here to smash the French. We're here to smash some French fries, all kinds of French cuisine. Diaz, back with you once again. But we do have a very special guest. Everybody was so focused on the Americans and the French that didn't see him over in lane 8, and he's our very special guest. Please introduce yourself.
That's right. I'm neither American nor French. I'm something in between, which might be Belgian. So let's just pretend that I'm a Belgian who's not cycling, the one Belgian that knows how to swim. And I was actually so fast. It was like that SpongeBob reference. Want to see me run to that boulder and back? Want to see me do it again? And I was so fast, they didn't realize that I won, and that's why Michael Phelps got the gold.
Also, I feel like I should point out, the cross between American and French is pretty clearly Cajun. They are the perfect Venn diagram. So, fun fact, I've actually been telling people this recently because of the French Olympics. The Acadians and the Cajuns actually come from like a common ancestral flow of people into it, because those were like the two major ports of entry for French colonists during that time. Couldn't go around anywhere else in the Gulf till they got to New Orleans. Nova Scotia was the way to get into Canada. We don't need to get into that. We're here for sports, and I'm here for what's making memories for you guys right now.
See, no, real quick though, we do have to say, if they evolve further, they will become crabs, because everything has to follow the rule of carcinization and become crab. Everything
becomes crab and then goes in a Cajun seafood pot.
Are we saying reject modernity, return the crab?
Return to gumbo.
Well, Diaz, I got a lot, so you should go first.
Look, I'll go first. Look, the Olympics were absolutely amazing. They made so many memories, but don't cry because the Olympics are over. Smile because the Paralympics are right around the corner. The 2024 games will start Wednesday, August 28th, so you still got about a little more than a week as you're listening to this. And there's a ton of sports and a ton of guys to be hyped for. But there's one event that I just learned about that I'm very excited for, and that is goalball. Have either of you heard of goalball?
I have not.
Goalball?
Goalball. Just goalball.
Isn't that almost all ball sports?
All sports reduced to their most basic form are goalball. Get ball to goal. That's what it's all about. That's what we're here for. And that is the sport that I am most excited for at the 2024 Paralympic Games. For the uninitiated, as I was, goalball is a sport that is designed to give a handball or soccer equivalent to the blind or the visually impaired. Played on a court that is about 18 meters long by 9 meters wide, so you can roughly imagine a volleyball court. And it's teams of 3. The goal is about 2 meters high, and it occupies the entire back line on either side. The ball is roughly the size of a kickball, but it has bells inside of it. So as it is bouncing towards the goal, players follow the sound of the bells. They try to block it before it goes in. If they do block it, they then locate it using the bells, pick it up, take their own shot. Because the game is entirely dependent on the sense of sound to track the ball, it is played in complete silence. Coaches cannot give instruction during the game. Teammates cannot communicate with one another. They have to completely just rely on their training and their instincts to play this game. At the Tokyo Games, the U.S. women won silver. They are not going to be able to avenge their loss to Turkey because they lost their qualifier to Canada. However, the U.S. men did make it. They'll be looking to medal for the first time since Rio. So I want to shout out the 6 men that will be representing us in those games. Trayshawn Faison, Christian King, Tyler Marin, Matt Simpson, Zion Walker, and Callahan Young. Let's bring home the gold, baby. I'm all about goalball. Look up the highlights. It is fascinating to watch, especially because the U.S. women, when they got their silver the last time, they had to win a semifinal in pretty dramatic fashion to even get there. It was tied after, I believe, 3 periods of overtime even at 2-2. And it had to go to just a penalty shootout, which is just one-on-one. It's almost pure psychology at that point. And it's so fascinating to watch. It's like, you just got to watch goalball. Goalball is the shit.
I think about this and I want to ask, like, how do they evaluate play? And I want to ask it that way very specifically because what I don't want to ask is, like, how do they go through this without being able to very literally watch tape? Like, how does one look at a performance of a goalball game afterwards and look at things to improve upon?
So, like, there is the strategy in that they'll divide up, like, this player will play, like, the left, this player will play the center, this player will play the right. And I guess at that point, it's just really about maintaining your positional integrity as best as possible and that kind of spatial awareness. That would be, like, the thing to train, like, in my best estimation.
It kind of feels like we made foosball real.
I mean, it's a fascinating game. Like, I definitely would encourage both of you. I would encourage all of our listeners to check out some highlights. It's a sick sport, and especially because, again, like, the game is played in complete silence. U.S. won on a save to advance. So it's like the player makes the save, everybody's still just completely silent, but you can see her, like, getting hype. And then the announcer finally says, like, save USA, USA wins. And then they just fucking erupt. The bench is, like, jumping almost, but, like, knowing they can't make noise. It's so fucking cool. Check out goalball.
That's so incredibly, like, perfect for production as well on your end.
One less element we got to worry about.
I just meant for the drama, but yeah.
The drama.
Well, there we go. X, how about you, buddy?
I got a lot of things. First 2 quick things. One, Aaron Judge, fastest to 300 home runs by 132 games. Man, he's not going to get to 600 because he came up so late. I think he's got 500, barring like some sort of massive occurrence, because he's 32, but his stats in every metric continued to go up over the past 4 years, where he's averaging 50 home runs a year. Like, even if this is the peak and it's down from here, there's still going to be enough time on that contract to get to 500.
When does Giancarlo Stanton finally stop playing for you guys so Judge can just be DH? Like, when can Judge just be big hitting boy? Like, he is the purest big hitting boy.
And if he's with Juan Soto, if they give Juan Soto $1 billion, and we continue to have like, there continue to be situations where Juan Soto hits 4 home runs and 4 straight at bats. So the White Sox decide to intentionally walk Juan Soto to pitch to Aaron Judge, who then hits a home run.
Diaz, like, this fucking thing where Yankees fans act like Juan Soto's not going to be on the team next year. It's so irritating. Like, no, he's there forever. He's clearly there forever.
It's because of Hal Steinbrenner, who keeps saying, like, oh, payroll is so high.
They're going to be stupid about you guys. And it's
but
Aaron
if they don't, then Hal Steinbrenner might get actually murdered by
If they don't, I'll bike to
Yankee
New York City. If they don't sign Juan Soto, I will bike to New York City.
So that's always nice. No matter what else happens with the Yankees, watching the 2 of those guys hit is very fun. Also, there's a really good Athletic article about Diego Forlan, who is apparently just a pro tennis player now, because he loved tennis as a kid. Obviously, became an incredible soccer player. Everyone fell in love with him at the World Cup back in 2010, and yeah, he just plays like ITF Masters level tennis now in South America. And it's really good tennis.
Friendship ended with Chase Budinger. Diego Forlan is my new best friend.
I gotta say, like, honestly, I probably need to credit Diego Forlan more than anything else for me becoming a soccer fan. Because, I mean, yeah, that 2010 World Cup, Xavier, everybody fell in love with him, and I am everybody. I gotta tell you. It was amazing. So, look, why not? Like, let's see how far he can go. I would love to see, like, and here's Diego Forlan in the opening round of, like, the U.S. Open.
I think he's probably too old for that. Maybe if you've seen the movie Challengers, maybe he could be in a Challenger in New Rochelle, New York, before the U.S. Open.
Let's give him a chance.
So those are the fun things. There are 2 other things I want to talk about. I can't say real quick. They might be a little longer. Did you guys see what happened at the NASCAR race last weekend?
I don't know any of the names of the people involved, but that one guy's a dickhead.
Yeah, it's my exact same amount of information.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Austin Dillon is currently...
What a fucking NASCAR name. Sorry.
He's currently 31st in the Drivers' Championship point standings. But if you win a race, you essentially lock up a spot in the NASCAR playoffs. So the only way he would make the playoffs is by winning. This past weekend in Richmond, he was winning for almost the whole race until there was a white flag and a restart with about 2 laps to go. He has a bad, and he's gonna lose. He intentionally wrecks 2 different drivers, Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin, while his spotter yells, wreck 'em, over the comms to win the race. So he wins the race. The other 2 guys literally want to murder him afterwards. And everyone's like, no, we can't have this shit.
Let me say again, as an ignorant of this sport person, Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano are 2 names that I've heard before. The other guy that has 2 first names that you said, I already forget both of them. I think one of them might have been Dylan.
Yes, Austin Dillon.
I was literally going to say Dylan Austin. Like, it's just a bland, creative player-ass bitch.
The thing is, taking away wins for aggressive driving is not a thing that NASCAR does. The last time they did it was 1991 when Ricky Rudd lost a win for spinning out a guy.
Which was bullshit.
They did not take away his win. So he is still the winner of this race. But they did say, you don't get the playoff point for winning. So you essentially get nothing out of this. And now everybody hates you. And I do like that because it is the most Pyrrhic victory ever. I sacrificed probably everyone liking me to make the playoffs. And now everyone will know I have that W next to my name for Richmond. Don't make the playoffs. Get fined at like $200,000 and everyone thinks I'm a piece of shit. You know, I like that tack by NASCAR. Can't wait to see what happens the next time Austin Dillon races and sees he might get a couple love taps out there. Other than Austin Dillon, the other thing I want to talk about is something that's actually been infuriating me.
Is it the other hot mic moment of the past week?
No, I did not want to talk about Jarren Duran. I've been talking about him enough. Okay. Fuck that guy. I want to talk about Jordan Chiles again. For those who don't know, Jordan Chiles had originally gotten 3rd place and the bronze in the floor exercise. This was after she had gotten her score. Her coach thought it was a bit low, put in an inquiry. Judges said, oh, you're right, we didn't count one thing, and bumped her score up by 0.1, and she got the bronze. After this happened, apparently in the background, Romania, who had their gymnasts finish 4th and 5th, were plotting. They went to the Court of Arbitration for Sport and essentially sued the Gymnastics Federation, the FIG, and the IOC. The Court of Arbitration for Sport put out a ruling saying that we were provided evidence that Jordan Chiles' inquiry came in at 1 minute and 4 seconds after her score was posted. For most athletes, it's like 3 to 4 minutes to put in an inquiry because it's until the next person gets their score. Because Jordan Chiles was the last athlete to do the floor exercise, she had 1 minute. So they said because she was 4 seconds over, she actually doesn't get that 0.1 point back, and Romania gets the bronze. This was a shock to everyone in U.S. gymnastics and Jordan Chiles. A very unfortunate thing about this was that there was a lot of racism from Romanians on the internet, kind of led by Nadia Comaneci. And they couched it by saying, we want all the athletes to get a bronze, but they put Jordan Chiles in the crosshair. Nadia Comaneci was liking racist posts on social media, and it led to Jordan Chiles essentially taking a break from social media because of it. But more information has been coming out since, because the U.S. tried to appeal, which was denied by CAS. They said, we have evidence that it was 47 seconds after the score was posted. Some of the things that have come out since then, because CAS just put out their full 29-page ruling, that the U.S. still says they want to appeal to the Swiss federal courts, which apparently never gets accepted, but they're still going to do it anyway. Romania spent 4 days in the background working up this lawsuit. They did not put the U.S. as a party in the case, only the IOC and the Gymnastics Federation. So no one messaged the U.S. until like the day before. What they did was they emailed the wrong people at first and then made contact with U.S. people at 12 a.m. U.S. time for a hearing that was going to be at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time because of the time over in Switzerland. So the U.S. had less than 8 hours while being asleep to figure out a defense. So they didn't really have anything. And it was essentially just Romania's word against the Gymnastics Federation, who admitted that, one, the person who was supposed to take the inquiry was not a employee and just a random person they deputized, and they don't remember their name, so they couldn't bring them there to talk about it. They had no actual process in place to determine if something was over the 1 minute inquiry mark and no guidelines to do anything. And they had no other excuses and just said, hey, we fucked up. And Cass said, well, if you fucked up and had nothing in place, all we can do is take the word for it that this came in at 1 minute and 4 seconds from the official timer, strip her of this medal and give it to Romania. That is where we're at right now. Oh, another thing, one of the panelists for the Court of Arbitration for Sport works for Romania. He has been actively representing the country of Romania in international sports disputes. They say that the U.S. did not bring a complaint to that, but again, they did not talk to the U.S. or get in contact with them until right before the hearing while everyone was asleep. So there's a good chance the U.S. just missed it because they had no time to prepare any sort of response. So Romania spends 4 days preparing a full lawsuit. U.S. gets notified 8 hours beforehand. A guy who works for Romania decides the lawsuit and judges that Romania gets the bronze medal. Meanwhile, Jordan Chiles is being racially abused by Romanians on the internet, and they tell her, give back your medal, and the U.S. is so far saying, fuck you, we're not giving it back. And I hope that the U.S. keeps at it and just kind of annoys the crap out of the IOC and CAS and the FIG to the point where they say, okay, fine, Jordan Chiles, keep the medal. Because if there's one thing the U.S. is good at, we can litigate the fuck out of anything.
That's really been my kind of thought process through the whole thing. Is like, of all of the countries to take on in a needlessly complicated bureaucratic litigation battle, why would you ever come at the king?
This is a country that has not forgiven what South Korea did in 1988, stealing Roy Jones Jr.'s gold medal in boxing.
Also, the USSR basketball game, that was total bullshit.
There's no chance that the U.S. is giving back this medal, and Jordan Chiles should not have to give back this medal because that was her score. And one of the things that Romania had brought up was that the Romanian who finished in fifth, technically fourth, because essentially two Romanians tied for third before Jordan Chiles' score was bumped up. One of them, who lost that tiebreaker, would have had an extra point if her coaches had inquired, but they didn't, and they tried to bring up their own inquiry. So in the lawsuit, they said that Jordan Chiles should lose her point one because her inquiry came in 4 seconds over. But they also said that their other Romanian should get her point one, even though they didn't challenge it at all during the actual competition. So they tried to have it both ways. And that's one of the things that's even more annoying about this from the Romanian perspective. She was over by 4 seconds. But even though we didn't challenge this one, the judges were still wrong. So we should have this one bumped up too, and both of our gymnasts should get bronze. Absolute bullshit. We'll see what happens with it, but it is very frustrating. But James, I know there are things making memories for you that are not litigation related. At least I hope so. Please tell me what it is.
Definitely not. No, definitely not. But in the spirit of competition and in the spirit of sending off the 2024 games with one last little segment, I've got a little treat for the two of you. It's 69 or 420 2024 Paris Olympic Games edition. We got 6 questions for you guys today. It's going to be head-to-head. Both of you give me an answer. Folks, you know how this works. This will be a series of numerical questions all related to the 2024 Paris Summer Olympic Games. However, we do not want the actual numerical answer. We simply want to know whether that answer is closer to 69 or 420. Gentlemen, are you ready to face off against one another?
Hell yeah.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. Number 1, Kevin Durant became the all-time leading U.S. Olympic scorer in history. How many field goals has Kevin Durant made for the U.S. Olympic men's team? Let's hear it from both of you. 69 or 420?
69.
69.
That's a point for both of you. It is indeed 69. He's made 85 2-pointers, 88 3-pointers, 173 field goals altogether for Kevin Durant. Speaking of records at the Olympics, Carlo Nassar was a 20-year-old Hungarian weightlifter, and he set a couple new world records, including new world record in the clean and jerk weightlifting category. How many kilograms in that category did he lift to set the new world record? 69 or 420?
420.
I'll say
420 from Xavier. You're going 420. Wrong for you both this time. 224 kilograms in the clean and jerk is 69. He did set another record that was above 420, so I didn't go with that one. Still 1-all. Let's go to one last world record. Let's talk about Mondo Duplantis for a second. He broke the world record in pole vaulting, which is one of the oldest games in the Olympics. Going back to the very first Paris Olympic Games in 1900, by how many centimeters did Mondo Duplantis surpass that Olympic record with his this year?
420.
I'll say 69.
All right. Xavier takes a 2-1 lead now. This one is 420. So back in 1900, 3.3 meters. It was the Olympic record for both that one and the 1896 Athens Games. His record this year was 6.24. That is 294 centimeters more. Fucking absurd. Let's move on from some records, but let's still talk about some impressive performances. Katie Ledecky, of course. She won the 800 meter for a fourth straight. That's an Olympic record, but she did also win her first ever bronze medal in a thrilling 400 meter race in which she lost to Summer McIntosh and winner Ariane Titmus. How many seconds did it take winner Ariane Titmus to complete the 400 meter to end all 400 meters? 69 or 420?
69.
69.
By just about 2 seconds, you are both correct. It is 3-2. 237.49 seconds. Incredibly close. Let's laugh at the French one more time real quick. The cleanliness of the River Seine was a concern coming into this, with both E. coli and also enterococcus. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. That was another bacteria that they were very, very concerned about. What is the level in colony-forming units, or CFU, per 100 milliliters to be considered safe for enterococcus bacteria contamination?
I hope it's 69. I really hope it's not 420, closer to 420. I really do.
I got to metagame it and also insult the French. It's 420.
Diaz, you have tied it up. It is 420 because the safe level is 400. And guess what? They still exceeded that several times.
That's so much shit. Literal shit.
All right, gentlemen. This last question, credit to the Sickos Committee on social media for the statistic to provide this. We are tied going into this 3-3. The U.S. won the medal count, both gold and total. If you were to count every medal that members of a team won, how many total medals did the United States win in that case?
420.
I got to go for the win, 69.
In that case, the winner is going to be Xavier with 420. Yeah. 327 total medals, 95 bronze, 101 silver, and 131 gold, if awarded in that fashion. And Xavier, your prize, you get to help us dive into this week's category.
Hell yeah. This is good because this was kind of inspired by the Olympics in the fact that I watched a ton of it, but I still missed a bunch of events. And just because of TV schedules and where they were hosting them, a lot of the sports I wished I could have watched but didn't were a lot of the water sports. Other than diving, which, you know, if I watched it, it would have just been, hey, China wins again. Things that I missed were sailing, surfing, kayak cross, which looks cool as all hell. You guys saw kayak cross, right?
Shout out to the Fox sisters, yes.
So, today I wanted to give water sports their due. I'm going to start by continuing to ignore the Olympic sports I just talked about. Instead, talk about a different water sport. What do you guys know about water skiing?
I know that if you're real good at it, you can make like the upside down pyramids of the people. You know the ones I'm talking about, right?
The closest that I have is like there's a Daniel Tosh joke about I've never seen a sad person on a jet ski. And that's like about as close as my knowledge gets.
Well, you know, I think that's a good amount of knowledge for water skiing. For anyone who doesn't know, water skiing, the main type is essentially you go on a lake and you ride on skis while holding a rope that's connected to a boat. that is essentially dragging you to create speed and momentum. There's also cable skiing, which is popular in Europe, which is like electronic cables all over the lake, and you just hold the rope attached to that, and that brings you around, so you can essentially water ski without a boat. But we're not going to really talk about that today. In water skiing, there's essentially three main disciplines. There's slalom, which, as its name suggests, involves skiers having to go across a course.
So wait, even with the slalom, are they still being pulled by a boat?
Yes.
That feels so dependent on the boat driver.
Hey man, what do you want me to say?
I guess that's just okay.
You gotta hope that your boat driver doesn't fuck up. In slalom, the skiers have to pass through a course of buoys. It's usually 26, and you have to go around all of them. After every lap, the boat is either sped up or the rope is shortened to make the next pass harder.
That's some summer camp limbo game bullshit to eliminate people.
I know, and I love it. So once you fall or miss a buoy, you're out, and you essentially just keep going, though, making every lap harder and harder until you're out. And whoever gets the most buoys wins. The next discipline is jump, which is by far the simplest, in that you go over a ramp and you see how far you can get. And whoever goes the furthest wins. And then the last one. Yes, although there are no sharks being jumped over, at least I hope not. Maybe some alligators, though. That is a possibility. And lastly, there's tricks, which is essentially you do a couple of different 20-second or so runs where you perform a series of tricks and a panel of judges scores you on it. So similar to skateboarding, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. Water skiing, like I said, is not an Olympic sport. It is part of the World Games, all the best sports not in the Olympics. Shout out to Birmingham, Alabama, which hosted the 2022 World Games, which is a very funny place to have an event like that. In water skiing, other than the World Games, there are three real major championships. There's the U.S. National Water Ski Championships that started in 1939, the Water Ski World Championships that started in 1949, and the Masters Water Ski Tournament that started in 1959.
We've been doing... That's way earlier than I would have expected people to have gotten bored with so many other things that we made competitive water skiing.
The U.S. invented water skiing in the teens, so it's been around for a long time. It really started popping off in the 20s, and then was weirdly popular during the Great Depression, too. But, yeah, the U.S. invented water skiing, so that's why the biggest championships are U.S. championships, and a lot of times the World Championships are also held in the U.S., pretty much like every other time. That's enough background about water skiing. I want to get into my guy for today. And similar to Diaz last week, this is also a bit of a father-son story. So our focus is going to be on the son, but to get there, we have to start with the father, Richard Downing Pope, otherwise known as Dick Pope Sr. So Dick Sr., who is unfortunately dead now, but that's because he was born in 1900, April 19th in Des Moines, Iowa, which is as far from water as you can probably get. But he did move at a young age to Winter Haven, Florida, right outside of Orlando. At an early age...
Presumably right next to Winter Park, probably hanging out with Darius Washington's, senior?
Yeah, all the seniors. So Dick Sr. started working in his father's real estate business as a kid. Allegedly, he closed his first real estate deal when he was 12 years old. Imagine buying a house from a 12-year-old. I would be very concerned about the optics of that, but I guess if you really want a house... During the Great Depression, he took a bunch of different jobs working as a promoter and a salesman, but one of the things that he had the most success with was going around Florida and doing lake shows, where he and his brother would promote speedboats and aquaplanes. To sell them, they would invite people to come to the lake, and then they would do shows with these items on the lake to get people interested in them. This was actually really good for him during the Depression. I don't know how people in Florida were affording a bunch of speedboats during the Great Depression, but apparently they did, and it made them a solid amount of money, better than most people during the Depression. In the early 1930s, Dick Sr.'s wife, Julie, was reading an article in Good Housekeeping. The article she was reading was about a man who was charging visitors money to see the very well-manicured gardens around his mansion. They thought, hey, maybe we could do something like that. So they came up with the idea of making their own garden park. So over the next few years, they worked to convert a section of swampland on the shores of Lake Eloise into a theme park. And on January 2nd, 1936, Dick Sr. and Julie officially opened Cypress Gardens, charging visitors 25 cents for a visit. Cypress Gardens is an immediate success. It would eventually grow to over 200 acres, and by the mid-60s would average over 1.5 million visitors a year, but we don't need to jump that far ahead yet. As we talked about, Dick Sr., very well versed in driving boats and doing shows on the water, and this essentially became a family pastime. The whole Pope family would do things like water ski. They would do things like water ski. One day in 1942, some soldiers who were on leave from World War II were visiting Cypress Gardens, and they saw photos of the family and some of their friends water skiing that were just around the area. And they mistakenly thought it was like an entertainment show. So they asked, all right, when's the next water skiing show? We can't wait for it. And the Pope family, specifically Julie, was like, we could do that. She goes and grabs her kids, daughter Adrian and her son Dick Jr., who is only 12 years old at this point, and they put on a water skiing show for these soldiers. The soldiers go fucking wild for it, and they bring more soldiers next weekend. There are 800 soldiers there to see the water skiing show that time. This goes so well that it just becomes a regular occurrence at this place. With that context, I want to turn to Dick Jr. Born December 12th, 1930. Essentially from the time he was born, his parents had this idea to create Cypress Gardens. So he essentially grows up on the water. Hence why his mom was comfortable making him entertain a bunch of U.S. soldiers on a whim as a preteen.
You say 12 like his dad wasn't selling houses at the age of 12.
Yeah, you know what? If you're selling houses at 12, you can't complain about doing water shows at 12 for U.S. soldiers. I mean, you're not the ones going over to fight in Germany or the Pacific. You could do some skiing. And with the water skiing shows becoming a regular occurrence at Cypress Gardens, Dick Jr. is out on the water all the time. And he spends a lot of this time trying to figure out ways to innovate in water skiing. And on March 6, 1947, Dick Jr. becomes the first documented person to barefoot water ski. I say documented because, according to sources at U.S. Wakeboarding and Water Skiing Federation, a man named A.G. Hancock had previously done it like a week or so beforehand, but there were no videos or photographs of it. It was just talk about him doing it. But they do have photographic evidence of Dick Jr. barefoot water skiing.
There was a dick pic, but no Hancock.
That is true. Very good linguistics there, Diaz. I appreciate it. So Dick Jr. and his friends had spent a lot of time testing it, but essentially they figured out that if the speed of the boat was increased high enough, then barefoot water skiing becomes possible. Regular water skiing, the boat is usually between 20 to 35 miles per hour. 35 is like the highest possible. But if you get up to 40, then you can ski on just your feet. And it's very dangerous moving at that, high of speed on the water, but it does make you able to barefoot water ski. So photographs in newsreels of Dick Jr. barefoot water skiing go viral. They're all over the place. And Dick Sr. takes advantage of the media attention to generate as much publicity for Cypress Gardens as possible. People love these videos so much that it causes a boom in water skiing in both America and in Europe, where they're watching videos of young Dick Jr. barefoot skiing in France and Belgium and Italy and stuff like that.
I was like, in my head, I'm thinking of a fake newsreel, but this is the peak of that fake newsreel time. It's mid-World War II. They're absolutely making those stupid.
Yeah, it 100% exists.
And see the sure-footed wonder.
So in 1948, the 17-year-old Dick Jr. travels up to Middle River, Maryland, Baltimore County, Maryland, to participate in the U.S. National Water Skiing Championships, where he embarrasses everybody from Maryland, unfortunately. Does win the overall title.
Dude, the Patapsco River is a bizarre place to choose for the water skiing championships. By all means, come visit Maryland, but it's an interesting choice.
Well, Dick Jr. wasn't content with just visiting Maryland once, because he does go back the next year, because they also had it in Middle River, Maryland. And not content with just winning the overall title, this year he also wins the slalom and the trick titles. The only thing that keeps him from a clean sweep is Buddy Boyle, who won the jump title. So curse you, Buddy, we almost had a Dick Pope sweep. This same year, he travels to the French Riviera to participate in the first ever water skiing world championships.
The championships he's going to are in Middle River, Maryland, at the French Riviera.
Yes, and this is the French Riviera 5 years after World War II ended.
You been to Middle River, Maryland recently?
I mean, I wonder what it was like in the late 40s.
Probably booming, actually, now that I think about it.
So, yeah, he goes to the French Riviera about 8 miles southwest of Nice, and he goes up against a bunch of Frenchmen. Unfortunately, he does not win anything this time. One thing to note is that, along with the barefoot water skiing, Dick Jr. was a big risk taker who focused on, trying to wow the crowd and landing big tricks and doing big jumps. So one of his signatures was called climbing the rope, where he would essentially just choke up on the rope to make himself closer to the boat, which would make him go faster and cause even greater heights on things, but would also lead to pretty significant falls. This practice is actually banned today because it is extremely dangerous. But in the late 40s and early 50s, they didn't know enough to say, actually, hey, this is insanely dangerous. So this 19-year-old is just doing this at the French Riviera against a bunch of 20 and 30-year-old Frenchmen.
Can't do it anymore because of woke.
Exactly. He was also one of the first skiers in competition to switch from 2 skis to 1, because it's harder to control if you don't know what you're doing. But once you are good at it, especially for slalom, it's much easier to maneuver if you're on 1 ski rather than 2. So the skill floor is very high to be able to switch to 1 ski. Once you get to it, you can do much better than 2 skis. Unfortunately, again, like I said, at this first World Championships, the judges were pretty much all Europeans who liked the conservative European way of water skiing, which is funny because water skiing hasn't been around that much. But French people still like the conservative water skiing of just don't crash and don't jump too high and don't go too fast.
The country that invented it gets to kind of decide what is and isn't cool, France.
You know what? This is okay, because the very next year, Dick goes out to Seattle. For the first time in a couple years, they're not holding the U.S. championships in Maryland. They're holding them in Seattle. And Dick wins 3 titles again. He repeats as the overall champion for the 3rd straight year. He repeats in the slalom, and he wins the jump, which he did not win previously, but he does miss out on repeating for the trick title, which he then just wins the next year at Lake Placid. So 4 consecutive years of him winning titles. Due to his popularity and everything that Cypress Gardens has done for water skiing, the 1951 World Championships get held right in his stomping ground at Lake Eloise and Cypress Gardens. So now the French are on his soil, James.
Oh, well, on his swampland.
And what do you think happens?
I imagine he fucking makes them eat Merida.
No Frenchman or woman wins any event that year because Dick Pope wins them. Dick Pope wins the overall title and the slalom. A tragedy for the French. One Belgian guy, the same Belgian guy who won the jump, Guy Leclerc, does win. So there is some Guy and Guy representation, but it's not French, it's Belgian, so it's okay. But massive success. I do want to say it's very funny if you look at the list of where they've held the World Water Ski Championships, because it's the French Riviera for the first one, then Cypress Gardens, Toronto, Beirut, Lebanon, Cypress Gardens again, Milan, and then Long Beach, California, and then since then it's rotated among a bunch of other countries. But I love that first 6: France, Canada, the US, the Middle East, and then Italy.
Sport. It's a truly global sport, and I appreciate that.
It is a global sport.
All you need is a large body of water and a boat. And that's it. I mean, we've established you can just do it with your feet. So it's incredibly accessible.
You know what? It's more accessible than hockey. The next year, in 1952, Dick becomes the first documented water skier to successfully land a 540, which I bet must have looked really cool. I wish there was footage of it. I could not find any. Unfortunately, this would be the last tournament that he competes in because it is the height of the Korean War, and Dick Jr. does join the Marine Corps. After the war ends, he switches to more of a management role, and he actually coaches the U.S. National Water Skiing team during those Beirut championships. So, he's still doing some good work, and they do win 4 different championships at the Beirut Games. Scotty Scott wins the trick championship. Willem McGuire wins the slalom, the jump, and the overall. It's a good showing for the U.S. out in Lebanon, led by the great coaching of Dick Jr.
Scotty Scott's parents gave birth to Scotty Scott, and they look at this kid, and you're like, what would be really fun for him to deal with for the rest of his fucking life is being called Scotty Scott.
Do you think like it's a Jimmy Butler where it's literally Scotty, or is he actually named Scott, and then they're just like, you poor soul, we'll at least nickname you Scotty?
I feel like it's gotta be Scotty.
You know what? I will try to figure that out over the next hour and a half while we do other stuff, just so I can have a resolution for the two of you, because I know it will eat at you if you don't know. After this tournament, Dick Jr. becomes the president of the World Water Ski Union, and with that power, he does promptly bring the World Championships back to Cypress Gardens for 1957, where the U.S. does, again, dominate in a tournament that is aired live on CBS that he pulled the strings for. After this, does a lot of show skiing. Some things that he's famous for are he taught the King of Jordan how to water ski and became like really good friends with the Jordanian royal family for the rest of his life, where they would just come to Florida and water ski with him. He also taught the last Shah of Iran how to water ski, which is fucking insane.
Dude, honestly, if you're a wealthy, powerful person living in a pretty arid region, I can understand water skiing being the height of luxury activities you can do.
And so you go to Florida and you hang out with Dick Pope Jr., who will teach you how to water ski.
It's the wettest place. It's the most opposite of the Middle East you can get. Florida.
The opposite of Jordan and Iran is Florida. I do kind of like that. During this time, he also creates his own manufacturing company, where he was just creating Cypress Garden skis that became essentially the staple in the water skiing industry for decades. He does take over for Dick Sr. as the president of Cypress Gardens in 1962, leads them through their best years ever, takes them public as a company in 1972, before eventually selling Cypress Gardens to company Harcourt Brace Jovanovich in 1985. Technically, Cypress Gardens is closed at this point, but it's been incorporated into Legoland, Florida. So if you go to Legoland, they do have a Cypress Gardens section still, so you can still see Cypress Gardens, which is cool. He is essentially the father of water skiing, and Dick Sr. too. I have to make sure Dick Sr. gets his credit.
He's kind of the son of water skiing.
It's like the son of the wind, and then the grandson of the wind.
Yes,
that's essentially where they're at. The two Dick Pope Sr. and Dick Pope Jr.
The Dick's Pope.
The Dick's Pope, yes. In 1989, Dick Jr. gets inducted into the Water Skiing Hall of Fame, and he also gets inducted into the Florida Hall of Fame. I like that Florida has I think every state has their own Hall of Fame at this point, but he is in both of those.
Yeah, but I feel like the Florida Hall of Fame's got to be a pretty top-tier Hall of Fame in terms of states.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. Dick Jr. does unfortunately die in 2007, but he lived an incredible life, helping create a sport from whole cloth, bringing it to the world. I didn't realize how popular water skiing is. There's 11 million water skiers in the U.S. alone, registered water skiers, and 900 sanctioned water ski competitions every year. Where the hell are all these competitions? Maybe I just didn't grow up around water enough.
I mean, apparently they're in Middle River, Maryland. I haven't fucking heard about them.
But all of them can trace their lineage to the Dick's Pope. If Dick Pope Sr. had actually competed, maybe I would have talked more about him, but Dick Jr. was the competitor. He was the athlete of the family. He couldn't have done it without Dick Sr., but I was just enamored by learning about water skiing and really wanted to make sure that we give Dick Jr. and all other water skiers their due, regardless of what happens for the rest of this show. But that is Dick Jr.
That was a very silly and wholesome story, Xavier. And from what I understand, we're in store for a few silly and wholesome stories today.
We have a few very silly and wholesome stories, and I wish I had as fantastic a name as Dick Pope to relate to you. We'll get to the name eventually. First, I want to give a little backstory, because Xavier, when you came up with this topic, I honestly had no idea what I wanted to talk about, because really my only experience watching water sports is at the Olympics. So I don't have as much of a background with any of those sports as I do with, say, my favorite sport, basketball. But we've all been at a pool and we played pool basketball. It got me thinking, has this sport ever been played, like, seriously at any level? Now, if you just do your basic internet research, Wikipedia is going to try to tell you that water basketball was first played in the Netherlands in the 1970s. It grew in popularity from there. The Dutch have a league and they have a national championship every year, and those are kind of the roots of water basketball. But this is where everybody's old grade school teachers are actually right. You can't just trust Wikipedia. You have to do your own research, and you have to go at least 1 or 2 pages deeper on your Google search to get to the truth. If you go those 1 or 2 pages deeper, you're going to find out that water basketball was actually invented in 1907 with rims suspended on either side, just like a real court, and a rule set that allowed for more freedom of movement as compared to the other popular sport to play in water at the time, water polo. The game of water basketball very quickly proved to be popular, but we cannot tell the story of this game without telling the story of the man who invented it, my guy this week, Tom Robinson.
I like that we're going all kind of builders for unique sports. This is a good start.
It's a great start. And unfortunately, I wish I could have had a Hancock or a Dick Pope. This would have been a much funnier story. We do have just about the most milquetoast name possible, Tom Robinson. But Tom Robinson invented this game. And the thing is, with doing a presentation on a guy who invented a sport just shortly after the turn of the 20th century, this means that he was born sometime in the 19th century. There's not a ton available about this guy online. What we do know is that as a young man, he was the aquatics director at the YMCA in Evanston, Illinois. He just had truly a deep passion for teaching people how to swim. And as part of his idea to get more people interested in getting into the pool, he invented water basketball in 1907 to just try to incentivize more people to get involved.
Dude, Evanston was making ice cream sundaes and water basketball all at the same time. Just an incredible cultural output by such a small little town.
You know, they got the journalism school. They're very creative people. They know how to conceptualize an idea and then put it into action. To describe the game, as opposed to, if we're playing at, a summer barbecue, maybe there's just a hoop floating in the water, or it's just, suspended on the one side. In his version of water basketball, it is 2 rims on either side. One of the major differences as opposed to how water polo was played is in water polo, there were massive scrums to try to get the ball. It's basically a free-for-all every time. Under water basketball, you can only have 2 people, 1 on either team, contesting for the ball at a time. So it's a more spaced out game. What was also allowed in water basketball is you could swim underwater. So this allowed for some kind of trick plays to form. 2 people swim underwater at the same time. They hand it off. Who's going to come up with the ball? There's all kinds of crazy deception that goes on in this game. He invents it again just as a way to try to get more people interested in swimming at the YMCA. But very quickly, the game grew in popularity to the greater Chicago area and eventually spread throughout the Midwest. In part due to the notoriety of this game that he involved, and also just his advocacy for swimming and his passion for it. he was named as the first swim coach in the history of Northwestern University in 1909. Tom Robinson did not like the label of coach, though. He preferred to be called a teacher, and as such, he saw himself responsible for all the students at Northwestern. Shortly after he was appointed as the first swim coach of the university, he also successfully lobbied to require that all students learn how to swim before graduating, just thinking that it's an essential life skill that a person should have. It wasn't just some grand notion he had and he didn't have any thought as to how it would be implemented. He also volunteered not just to coach collegiate swimmers, but to be the teacher for the mandatory swim class for all of the students at Northwestern. As the steward of that swimming program, Tom knew that his game of water basketball could help to attract people, and it could be like essentially what he called a curtain raiser ahead of the actual swim meets. Like the main event is going to be the 100 meter, the 200 meter, butterfly, everything that we know about a swim meet. But first, check out this cool game that I came up with. Isn't it so fun? Isn't it so exciting?
Who wants to see some dunks? Well, wait,
definitely
can they dunk?
No dunks.
Oh, okay,
no, definitely no dunks. It's
because it's not.
It is at 10 feet, like while they're still in the pool. So it is like a very.
And you can't have like a teammate, I imagine, getting underneath and just kind of shooshing you up.
No. Yeah, that is not.
That would be cool though. What's that movie? What's the Will Ferrell movie where they invent the alley-oop?
Semi-pro.
It'd be like that. Just call a foul on what?
Double technical.
Is there a rule that says they can't do that?
To my best knowledge, there could be dogs on teams, and they could allow to do that. The rule set, it's hard to come up with the rule book from 1910. It's tough to stumble across it, but to my best knowledge, it's maybe something you just have to try out first. The game, again, just as a curtain raiser at first, it does prove to be pretty popular, and it does help to grow this nascent program of Northwestern swimming. And early on, Tom is showing himself to be a quality coach, because at the 1912 Olympic Games, he would send Ken Rusag to become the first Wildcat swimmer in Olympic history. Ken would earn the bronze in the 100-meter free and would be a member of the silver winning team for the 4x2 free. So the program, only 3 years in, but it's already produced an Olympic swimmer. And the popularity of swimming at Northwestern continues to grow, not just due to the success of the program, but also because of this curtain-raising sport, which is continuing to attract more and more attention. In 1913, the Big Ten, it had recognized water polo as its water sport official of the conference, but in 1913, it would drop water polo and would replace it with Tom Robinson's game, water basketball, in 1914. With his sport now officially recognized, the entire aquatics program at Northwestern begins to take off. From 1914 to 1918, Northwestern wins 5 consecutive Big Ten swimming championships. Along the way, his water basketball team goes undefeated, outscoring their opponents 166 to 55 over that 5-year span. In 1919, the streak does come to an end because of World War I. There is no Big Ten swim meet for the 1919 season, and World War I had an effect on the athletics department at large. Led to some consolidation. Some people had to take on other sports. With that, Tom Robinson is still very safe as the swim coach of 10 years at this point at Northwestern. But he's had so much success coaching the water basketball, they figured, why don't we give him a shot to coach the land basketball? So for the 1918-1919 season, Tom Robinson becomes the head men's basketball coach at Northwestern. And I'm not going to act like he was this great basketball coach, but what I will say is that the coaches before him and after him both had losing records in their lone seasons at Northwestern. However, in the one season with Tom Robinson as head coach, the Wildcats go 7-6 in regular season play, including a 6-4 mark in Big Ten play.
That sounds like a winning record to me. That sounds like a winning basketball program.
It is more wins than losses in a time when all other coaches before and after him had lost more than they had won. And this is, again, entirely just a swim coach. He invented this water basketball game, not as a sideshow, but as an idea to get people into the pool more.
Not a sideshow, an opening act.
An opening act, exactly. So he does have the 1 year as the land basketball coach with his winning record. while he did enjoy that mild success on land, he was only the men's basketball coach for the one season. For 1920, immediately refocused on his aquatics program. Not just did he lead the Northwestern team to the Big Ten championship again in 1920, but it's important to point out Tom Robinson believes everybody should be safe in the water and believes that everybody should be able to be a lifeguard. So it is Tom Robinson who in 1920 forms the first female lifeguard division of the Red Cross. He trained them, he certified them. It is Tom Robinson who founded that first female lifeguard section of the Red Cross. 1920 is also the first year that the Big Ten begins to formally recognize a champion of their water basketball conference. It is a mere formality. Northwestern, again, remains undefeated and claims 3 consecutive Big Ten championships. 1924 is going to be a very big year for Tom Robinson and for his swimmers. He's going to send 4 different ones to the Olympics. He's going to send Dick Howell, Ralph Breyer, Bob Skelton, and Cybele Bauer. Skelton wins gold and sets a world record in the 200-meter breaststroke, and Cybele Bauer would win gold in the 100-meter backstroke. And I need to take a quick sidebar real quick about Cybele Bauer because she is absolutely the greatest swimmer that you've never heard of. In 1922, Cybele Bauer, at an unsanctioned event in Bermuda, it's important to say that, but she would set the world record in the 440-yard backstroke. Not the women's world record, the world record, period, by 4 seconds with a time of 6 minutes, 24 and 8/10 seconds in the 440-yard backstroke. She also would set 23 different women's world records along the way. Most of them in the backstroke, but not strictly a specialist, just an overall dominant swimmer. She was engaged to Ed Sullivan. Yes, Ed Sullivan of early TV fame. Unfortunately, Cybele Bauer died of cancer at the age of 23 years old.
Devastating.
If she had been able to have her entire career, absolutely the most decorated swimmer of all time. Like Katie Ledecky, eat your heart out. Cybele Bauer would have been the GOAT. Very tragic. I couldn't just say her name and just gloss over. Like, we need to take a second, recognize Cybele Bauer, arguably the GOAT of swimming.
You know what a lot of this day has been so far? America, invent sport. Be good at it. Declare yourself world champion.
Well, it's very funny because, like, a lot of my research depended on an article in the Northwestern Archives, which was essentially saying that the Northwestern dynasty and the sport that it invented.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely what they were all about there. Back to Tom Robinson. Obviously, the Olympics were a big year for his program, and 1924 was also a big year for water basketball because it was the first year that the NCAA would formally recognize it as a sport on a whole level and would institute a championship for it. There's no suspense here. We know Northwestern wins the national championship in 1924 water basketball. Very clearly asserted themselves as the preeminent program in the sport that they have invented. 1924 is also the first year, however, that the NCAA holds swimming championships, period. And Tom Robinson does the double as the Northwestern Wildcats are the first NCAA champion in swimming. Unfortunately for our waterbound Red Auerbach, his dynasty was not to continue, because the Big Ten would replace water basketball with water polo the following season. And with that being the case, Northwestern would also pivot to replace their water basketball team with a water polo one. Tom Robinson, to his credit, supported the move, saying water polo, quote, once developed, will rank as great a place in the conference as water basketball has in the past. He wasn't just going to sit there and cry over spilled milk. Northwestern would repeat as swimming champions in 1925, and sticking to his word of wanting to help grow the game of water polo to be as great as water basketball once was, he becomes the first head coach of the water polo team in Northwestern history. For the following 20 years, Northwestern continues a tradition of excellence in the pool. Tom Robinson would guide the Wildcats to 7 conference titles in water polo, and perhaps could have gotten a couple national championships along the way if the NCAA as a whole recognized water polo. It did not institute a water polo championship until 1969, which is nice. But the NCAA, from that first championship in 1924 onward, did continue to hold swimming championships, and Tom Robinson would claim 4 more in 1928, 1930, and 1933, in addition to his repeat in 1925, which brought him to 5 total national championships won as the head swim coach for Northwestern. While he achieved tremendous success over his 35-year run, which ended with his retirement in 1944, Tom Robinson never got too big for his community. He continued to lead community swim lessons every summer at the Evanston YMCA, and not including all of the students who graduated from Northwestern in those 35 years. This is not counting them, just community members in Evanston, Illinois. It's estimated that he taught 50,000 people how to swim through his summer swimming lessons, in addition to every student of Northwestern also graduating knowing how to swim because of him. In 1975, Tom was inducted into the International Swimming Hall of Fame. In 1984, he was named a charter member of the Northwestern Athletics Hall of Fame. And in 2002, he was named to the American Swimming Coaches Association's Hall of Fame. It is evident through my research that Tom Robinson was the definition of a guy's guy. For his career, he puts 11 swimmers into the Olympics, with 2 of them winning golds. He wins 10 Big Ten swimming championships, 5 NCAA swimming championships, and just as when I presented on Mills Lane, and Mills Lane is still the reigning defending NCAA welterweight boxing champion, Tom Robinson and his Northwestern Wildcats are still the reigning defending NCAA water basketball champions.
That's an impressive time to hold that title.
It's over 100 years.
Yeah.
I think the lasting effect of Diaz's presentation is going to be that I'm going to call basketball land basketball from now on. Mm-hmm. So, yes. we watched LeBron James versus Victor Wembanyama in the land basketball Olympic gold medal game.
Well, land and air.
No, because you got to leave space for if there is ever you fly on drones. Oh, so we basketball.
Do those it's on water, but it's those fucking 2-footed hover pad things with a giant.
Yeah, and you play basketball that way.
In Dubai.
Yeah,
that's how they do it. They didn't have that kind of technology in Tom Robinson's time. If they did, I'm sure he would have found a way to incorporate it into his game. All jokes aside, obviously his greatness as a water basketball coach, but also just his pure advocacy and love for wanting everybody to know how to swim. Founding the first women's lifeguard division of the Red Cross, continuing to lead summer lessons for free for every family in Evanston to teach everybody how to swim. It's very clear he never was a big fish in a small pond. He was instead just a guy that loved the water and wanted everybody else to love it as much as he did. Unfortunately, Dick Pope Jr., Xavier, is able to confirm that he died. There's so little available about Tom Robinson online. I didn't find an obituary. For all we know, Tom Robinson
He's the oldest man in history.
He may still be out there preaching the benefits of water basketball to this day.
He will remain alive until someone else claims the NCAA water basketball title.
He will live forever through his basketball title. Yeah, just an awesome guy at the turn of the 20th century who fucking loved swimming and wanted to find all different ways to teach people to get into the pool.
Okay, I did find out that he has passed away. The Northwestern Archives tweeted back in 2019 an old picture of his passing at the age of 75.
Which means now his ghost is going to haunt you, Diaz, and say he has unfinished business and you need to go to the NCAA and reinstate water basketball so that another team can win and free him from his ties to this mortal plane.
It is my duty. It's the duty of this podcast. It's the duty foisted upon me. We will avenge you and your sport, Tom Robinson. People will remember how awesome water basketball is and how you may not argue that it's better than water polo because you just love the water, but I'll say it for you. Water basketball is 10 times the game that water polo is. It's time to have a change, not only in this country, but also in the Olympics. Water polo out. Water basketball in.
So I found Scotty Scott. His first name is Felton.
No.
So Scotty was his nickname. Felton W. Scott, otherwise known as Scotty Scott.
Unreal.
I'm weirdly good at finding obituaries online, apparently. It took me about 3 seconds to find Tom Robinson's obituary and Scotty Scott's obituary.
That's tough.
I guess that's my talent.
I'm glad he made it to 75 at least. 75 is like...
That's basically the national average.
You did good. But I know something that's not average, and it's going to be our third guy this week, and it's going to be presented by you, James.
Yes, far, far from average, though we won't go far from the natatorium. I'm kind of glad that you talked about swimming for a while. I thought, maybe I'll bring in one of the, 9 Olympians from the North Baltimore Aquatic Center not named Michael Phelps or Katie Ledecky, but there were just so many to choose from. So instead, I want to, before I get to my guy, talk for 1 second about injuries. If you are not someone who's been listening to this show for a long time, or if you don't know me personally, I was hit by a truck while biking. And while I have a perfectly fine surgically repaired shoulder now, you keep thinking about that forever in biking. That doesn't entirely leave your mind. And I'm sure that's true for athletes that have injuries. That's also true for the sports fan watching the athletes have the injuries a lot of the time. We see these Clint Malarchuks, these Sean Livingstons, these Damar Hamlins. And it's shocking to know that this can happen at any moment in the sport, and that the sport is often expected to continue to go on. And I want to talk about a guy who has a moment centered around one of those moments, one of those shocking reminders of the razor wire act that so many of these sports are, who not only had that reminder of mortality for us, but then put that mortality in the rearview mirror and continued to not only ace that competition, but to make history in doing so. So the guy that we're going to talk about that did this is Greg Louganis.
Okay. I'm very intrigued about this. I know of Greg Louganis. I was expecting to not know who you were going to talk about, but I very much do.
Nah, it's Greg Louganis. That diving guy. I think a perfect person to fit this show. I feel we should start with the fact that his full name is Gregory Efthymios Louganis. And if you can't tell from me saying it, it's a very Greek name. And his dad, Peter Louganis, is indeed very Greek. His mother, Frances, run-of-the-mill Midwestern. Greg is half Samoan, half Swedish. Greg is adopted. So I'll tell you what Greg knows for most of his life. There was a pair of 15-year-olds in Hawaii. One of them was of Pacific Island descent. One was a Swede. That Swede was his mother, who moved back to the San Diego area and gave Louganis up for adoption, at which point he was adopted by the Louganis family. And he grows up with one sister, an adopted sister. And Frances, the mother, gets them involved in performance artistic gymnastic class very, very early on. The older sister is doing that. Greg's tagging along. And the mother recognizes that Greg is really taking to these, so she continues to enroll him in gymnastics classes as he's getting older. He talked about that he had a female partner in an interview with the Harvard Business Review. He doesn't give the name of the partner, but there was a girl at the time. The two of them, phenomenal together, because he feels like he's a performer at heart. That is always going to kind of be at the core of what Greg is. It's about performance. As he and his partner get older, around the age of 6, there's a great gymnastics program for her. There's not really a great men's gymnastics program in the San Diego region at this time. And so he doesn't really know what to do with all these skills he's built up. He's very good in particular at the trampoline. That works out well because the family just built a pool in the backyard with a diving board. And he just starts going apeshit on this diving board, and his mom, in an attempt to keep him from getting killed and hitting his head on the board, decides to enroll him in some classes. And so this is how Greg gets into diving. I don't have a name for his first coach. All I have is a description from a Salon article. His first coach was a hideous person who was always screaming at him. So they don't stick with it for too long. Very quickly, he gets this dude, John Andres, much more chill. And this is the guy that kind of ushers him into the competitive diving world. Gets pretty good by the age of 13. This is when he's noticed at a competition by this guy, Dr. Sammy Lee, who had won diving gold in the 48 and 52 Olympics for the United States. And so his words carry a little bit of weight when he sees this kid and says, there's the greatest diver in the history of diving if he gets the right coach. Direct quote from Dr. Lee. A couple years later, Pete is taking a little bit more of interest in Greg's life. I should say about his dad real quick. Kind of seems pretty shitty. He was definitely an alcoholic. Divorces Frances not long after this. Wasn't super active in Greg's life until Greg got very good at diving. And he's like, oh, all right, sick. I got this kid. But Pete does do one very good thing here. At this meet, when Greg loses to a diver who is being coached by Dr. Sammy Lee, Peter goes up to him and convinces him to take Greg on as one of his pupils. And so Dr. Sammy Lee is his coach, preparing him with his Olympic experience as Greg gets ready in high school for his first Olympic experience in the 1976 Montreal Summer Olympic Games. He qualifies as a 16-year-old in both categories. Do you two know the two different categories in diving?
Springboard and
yep.
Was synchronized? Oh, no, that's the team.
Yeah, so there's all the different like single, women, doubles, etc. Springboard is one of them. It's the kind of diving ones. Diaz, last chance for an assist.
The one that's not a springboard.
I mean, yes, that is true. It is platform. That is the word of what platform, you described. The heights, for what it's worth, 3 meters for springboard, 10 meters for platform. Beyond the height, there are a couple other differences. It's about the approach towards the jump, really, and it creates some mechanical differences in how you approach your dive. With the springboard, you are timing out with the reverb of the board from that first little like stutter jump that you kind of have as you go up there. So most of your upwards momentum is coming from the board. That does mean that you have a lot of inertia that you have to work against, and most of your like training is going to be working against that versus getting air. Whereas with a platform, you're up from a higher height, and all of that upward momentum is coming from your lower body pushing you up. So in a massive oversimplification of the two, you tend to have a stronger upper body with the springboard. You tend to have a stronger lower body with the platform. And as such, you might see someone compete in both. You really see someone excel at both.
Unless they're Chinese and they have been bred their entire life by the Chinese state government to win diving.
Hey, I promise we will get to the Chinese diving program with Greg Louganis. Like, yeah, no shit, that's going to come up. To like drive home one more time just that point, none of the medalists in the 3-meter springboard in the 76 games are even competing in the 10-meter platform. Greg does pretty well, 6th overall. Excellent first showing. All the way over in the 10-meter platform, he gets a silver medal as a 16-year-old. The only person he loses to is this Italian Klaus DiBiase, who had basically like owned the event for that country since the late 60s. It had just been Klaus DiBiase on the platform for over a decade at this point. So he comes back to high school with that silver medal around his neck. Lee at this point has to move on from coaching Greg, and he gets a new coach, Ron O'Brien, and Ron O'Brien's pretty much going to carry him out the rest of the way. So this is one of the huge things that happens after those games. The other huge thing that happens is Klaus DiBiase retires, and so the diving world's starting to open up a little bit more for some young up-and-comers. World Aquatic Championships. 10 meter is there for the taking now, and Louganis decides he is going to go up against the guy that finished 4th in the 76 games, Falk Hoffman, and he does get silver, but Greg edges him out to begin a period of platform dominance with his gold medal here. I will say real quick for the 3-meter springboard, the same guy that won the games, a U.S. guy by the name of Phil Boggs, also won here. The other thing that starts in 78, alongside that period of gold dominance, is college for Greg. Greg had struggled in school a lot up to this point. He'd had a stutter when he was a kid, which he got roundly like bullied and tortured for. And when he finally got the stutter taken care of, he thought he was like dumb for how hard reading was. He just couldn't get the words to like work out on the page, but worked through it, tried really hard to overcome that, and he has managed to get all the way to the University of Miami now, where he's going to study drama as he continues to be an NCAA guy, because again, Greg at his core is a performer. That is what he is all about, even now with diving. This is also around the time that he learns about what dyslexia is in college, and he's like, oh shit, that's what's been going on forever. Cool. So now he's got that. It's a great time for Greg. Big come up. As he's in college, goes to the Pan Am Games in 79 in San Juan, Puerto Rico. He is up against Boggs, who we talked about in 76 and 78, and Mexican Carlos Giron. They are on the podium for both events. But this is the first time that Louganis sweeps gold in both the platform and the springboard. Again, that is a very rare thing to do, and he's already now, in just his 3rd major international competition, captured the gold in both. And now he is all set for the 1980 Moscow Summer Olympics, baby. And we're moving on from that because he gets a congressional gold medal and nothing else because we have the boycott. In 1981, Louganis transfers from Miami to UC Irvine. In 82, he's able to compete in the 1980 World Aquatics once again in Guayaquil, Ecuador. Boggs is gone, and so is any challenge to Louganis. Scoring for this, the way diving works, it's going to be scored across all 10 rounds. You get all your scores put together, and winning scores are often, for the platform, going to be in like the 600s, maybe a little bit lower for springboard, just because like the maximum difficulty you can do with a springboard's a little bit lower because there's less time in the air. In the 3-meter springboard, he gets 752.67 points across 10 rounds. And in the 10
What was he doing?
Because he did trampoline and gymnastics, Greg Louganis is better at diving because he didn't get into it through diving.
He's pulling some ray gun moves. He's the most creative. All of his moves are unique.
They're milkshake ducking ray gun, and I hate that that's a sentence that like has a meaning, and we don't need to go into.
I did see that the Australian Olympic Committee was like, "Yay, all those things are lies." Like, okay, cool. Ray gun and her family had no process in this selection. It was a full Oceania championship, judged by other people.
Ray gun is not a milkshake duck. Speaking of judging by other people, there is exactly one dive in the 10-meter platform that Greg does that gets a perfect 10 from all 7 judges. Running the table with them, gold in both, does the exact same at the 83 Caracas Pan Am Games, and then his only ever appearance in the World University Games. It's that same year in 83 in Edmonton, double gold once again. Also in 1983, he meets a member of the rowing team at UC Irvine named Jim Babbitt. And Jim Babbitt convinces Greg that he needs a manager to really handle like this starring career that he already kind of has, and is certainly going to have after next year's LA Games. Surely this guy is going to be one of the stars that's promoted there. Jim convinces Greg that the perfect person to be this manager is actually Jim Babbitt. Greg is Jim's first and only ever client. If there are many red flags that are going off for you, put a pin in all of those and just hold on to them for now. We reach those 84 games. Greg's chance to finally get Olympic gold, and I'm just going to read off the scores for the top 3 finishers in the finals. I don't think anything else needs to be said. Starting off with the 10-meter platform. In the bronze, China's Li Kongjing, 638.28 points. The silver, US's Bruce Kimball, 643.5. Greg Louganis wins with a score of 710.81. In the 3-meter springboard, US's Ronald Marriott gets bronze with a score of 661.32. China's Tang Liangde gets a score of 662.31. Greg gets a score of 754.41, outdistancing him by nearly 100. It is just absurd. And Jim Babbitt was like absolutely correct that the 84 games are going to make some stars. Greg is always quick to point out, you look at like Mary Lou Retton, someone who probably, let's not be mean, benefited from the Russian boycott in terms of her ability to win that year. And she's instantly catapulted to fame with all these TV appearances. She makes the coveted cover of the Wheaties box that we've discussed here many a time. Greg never gets that Wheaties box with all of this, or really like any endorsements aside from, he does get Speedo, which makes sense because 1, swimming, and 2, Greg Louganis is fucking hot at this point, and ladies love Greg Louganis. In the words of Babbitt, this is from an 88 Salon article, his Q rating is highest with 14-year-old girls who can really only be marketed to with his beauty. That is interesting because the unspoken rumor for why he's not getting any of these sponsorships is that Greg Louganis is gay. That is what, everyone tends to say in the swimming world. This rumor is true. Like, Greg is a closeted gay man at this time. We should say that. He lives this like secret life as he continues to dominate the sport. He wins double gold again at the 86 World Championships. He wins double gold again at the 87 Pan Am Games, three-peating there. But all of this kind of comes to a head in 1988 because early in the year, Greg Louganis receives an HIV-positive diagnosis. This is luckily right after azithromycin, which is better known as AZT, the retroviral drug, has just been approved by the FDA for treatment that March. So he's among like the very first wave of gay men diagnosed with HIV-positive status to be able to not just get a death sentence. He just has to take AZT every 4 hours for the rest of his life. Something about Greg and fear, though. As a kid, he developed ophiophobia, that is the fear of snakes. And so what he did when he got scared of snakes is he saved up his money to buy a boa constrictor. And then he had this pet boa constrictor and forced himself to feed it until he just wasn't scared of snakes anymore. Greg faces fear head on. That's the only way he knows how to tackle it. And his doctor says, like, honestly, your health at this point, you could still go for the Olympics. Like, that's not going to stop you from being at your peak performance. And so he decides to proceed as planned with this diagnosis kept a secret for the 88 Seoul Games. So there's that pressure. There's the pressure that he's getting, in his own words, a little thicker. And there's the pressure that the Chinese diving program, Xavier, as you mentioned, it's really ramping up at this point. And then in the middle of all these preliminaries, Greg has another brush with mortality. There's a move in diving, the 3.5 reverse somersault tuck. It's officially referred to as dive 307C. It's unofficially referred to as the dive of death. At the pool, if I were to see someone doing this kind of a flip off the diving board, we'd call it a gainer. It's one of those flips where you're going heels over head. It is 3.5 of those. So you are finishing entering the water head first. And the dive of death is a very literal name because it's going to, with that gainer flip, bring your head as close to the board pretty much as physically possible. In those 1983 World University Games in Edmonton that we mentioned earlier, there'd been a Soviet, Sergei Chalibashvili, who tried to hit the diving board, and fell into a coma and later died. The person that was on the ladder for that next dive when this happened was Greg Louganis, who had to remain on that ladder through 20 to 30 minutes of them cleaning up the pool of blood and then continue to perform. And in order to win gold, he hit dive 307C in that very games. That is not the only time that dive has killed people in this decade. In 1987, Australian Nathan Mead died doing this dive. And in fact, Greg has come very close to death doing this dive. At one point, he was in Tbilisi, Georgia, which is kind of eerily the hometown of Sergei Chalibashvili. Luckily, when he hit a dive there in a 1979 competition, hit a plywood diving board. So he was only knocked unconscious for 30 minutes for doing this in the pool instead of dying.
Good work, Georgia. Being too cheap to afford actual diving boards.
That is the context as we step up here late in the preliminary rounds in the 1988 games. In his own words, like he knew it was going to be close. His first thought when he hits the water and hears a sound is, what was that? His second thought is, oh my God, that was my head. And his third thought is, how do I get out of this pool without anybody seeing me? Which is a laughable thought in the middle of the Olympics, and he is just spurting blood out of the back of his head. He swims over to Coach Ron O'Brien. They get him out. They get him stitched up with a couple dozen stitches. They ask, like, do you want to keep going? He's got a couple preliminary dives left, and there's not a long life necessarily for divers. He's not thinking about 92 down the line, really. He says he's sort of, because of like the knee-jerk adrenaline, just immediately says yes, but then lets some fear start to seep in, and O'Brien can see this, and he starts hyping him up and telling him that he got this. He finishes, and even with this, still finishes third overall in the preliminaries to get through to the medal round, which is the next day. Tan Liang Day, who'd finished very well at 84, pushes him. But he and his countryman Li Deliang take silver and bronze as Greg, a day after busting his fucking head open on the board, captures the gold for a repeat in the category. The next week, we are now on the 10-meter platforms. And it's all about Greg and Xiong Ni of China, who going into the final leads him by 3 and then nails an 82.56 jump, which is like fucking incredible. Greg knows that he needs something special to try and become the first person to sweep these events back to back, since Pat McCormick did it for the United States in 52 and 56, only the second time ever if he can manage it here. And so what does he do? He goes to dive 307C, and he fucking nails it with an 86.7, winning by 1.14 points on the final one. Gets the gold in both of these. He is now repeated in back-to-back Olympics. Probably would have been able to three-peat if not for the 1980 summer boycott. Perhaps the greatest honor that he receives, though. 1988 Athlete of the Year by ABC's Wide World of Sports. Incredible recognition from an incredible organization to recognize him. And that is Greg's last major professional competition, but there is a long personal story afterwards that we will try and condense down pretty quickly. In 89, he fires Jim Babbitt and also breaks up with him because he'd been in a very abusive relationship with Jim Babbitt, both in a professional and personal sense. Jim Babbitt shortly thereafter died of AIDS complications. One can probably surmise that Jim Babbitt may have been the one to pass on the HIV virus to Greg Louganis. He was horribly abusive. He had stolen like 80% of his wealth. This is an excellent thing for Greg Louganis to rid himself of this toxic person. Around this time, someone else enters his life, and that's his biological dad, Samoan Fuvale Lutu, who had a brother, Greg's biological uncle in San Diego, who'd been kind of like keeping tabs on him. And eventually, during one of these international competitions, someone else comes to Greg saying, your dad is here. Would you like to meet him? And over the next few years, they slowly kind of defrost a relationship. He meets some of his half-siblings. He's gone to family reunions with the Lutu family now. So he's reconnected with that. In 2017, he had made contact with his mother. I was not able to find any further information beyond 2017, but he's definitely spoken to both of his birth parents now at this time. And that, he said, was really important for him to be able to kind of love himself and not feel like he was garbage that had been thrown out. In an effort to kind of like deal with his mortality, he in 1993 has what he thinks is going to be his last birthday party. Everybody out, and it's supposed to be this big farewell because he was ill at the time and thought this was the end. But goddammit, Greg Louganis just keeps on living. And with this kind of renewed lease on life, in 1994, ahead of the Gay Games here in the United States, he releases a videotaped coming out message. In 1995, makes his AIDS and HIV status public as well in his autobiography, Breaking the Surface. One thing real quick about the people who say, hey, you should have made everyone aware of that in 1988 when you had a head wound in the pool. Pools are filled with chlorine. They clean it up for a lot after someone fucking bleeds in it, so shut up. They took care of that. No one was at any risk. Many doctors have said there was like the most microscopic possible chance of that being conveyed. This is the beginning of like Louganis the activist, in addition to Louganis the actor. That's kind of his day job. He does off-Broadway stuff. Those are his main occupations for 20 years, along with his other passion, which is dog agility training. I'm sorry we don't have time to go further into that, but Greg Louganis, big dog agility trainer. He does at one point marry Johnny Shello, who is just this paralegal that he finds on like Match.com. They have a mutual divorce in 2022. And then he does also do some coaching for the United States in 2012 and 2016 for the Olympics. During that time, the United States wins 7 medals, 3 bronze, 3 silver, and 1 gold by David Boudin in 2012 in the 10-meter platform. This is also when very recently retired British diver Tom Daley comes out as gay, still during his career, citing Greg Louganis as a major inspiration. In 2016, though, Greg Louganis gets finally the last thing that had eluded him, the last thing that we really needed to like put a bow on this. Longer than Olympic gold had eluded him, longer than an honest public image had eluded him, one other thing had eluded him, and that was a spot on the Wheaties box. And god damn it, in 2016, as part of an Olympic Legends series, he is indeed finally put on the Olympic Wheaties box. They say it has nothing to do with the Change.org petition that had gotten like 45,000 signatures. No, definitely not that PR. We just decided to do Greg Louganis. But he does get it. And with that, I think that kind of allows him to feel like he's no longer being denied the opportunities that he was as this all-time great, like maybe the greatest diver of all time. I'll admit that. We might have to have as a serious conversation here because Greg Louganis is arguably the greatest diver that's ever lived. And he's more than just that. He's more than just a guy with a funny name. He's more than the diver that had this terrible injury. He is my water sports guy this week, and I hope that we can induct Greg Louganis into this hall.
I do like Greg Louganis a lot. I don't think he passes the Babe line. Like, I think he out of the 3 people that we've talked about, he is 100% the most accomplished competitor and the closest to that line. But I wouldn't. Diving is not a thing I would penalize him for. Like, I think diving is just low enough on the rung of sports that being the best at it still doesn't pass the Babe line. Like, if you wanted to say, like, Mark Spitz, I might put that 2 over the line because near the same time, Mark Spitz was the greatest swimmer. And I think swimming is up there. So like Katie Ledecky and Michael Phelps can never be a guy. I don't think Mark Spitz could be a guy. I think Greg Louganis is just under that line.
Well, rather than just speak on Mr. Louganis, let's speak on the three guys that we have before us. Our three amphibious guys as comfortable with the water as they might theoretically be in the hull, but only one of them will get to split time between the water and the hull.
I have to say, I found it extremely funny and the most Diaz thing ever that I could pick a topic of water sports and he still finds a way to make it basketball.
The commitment to the bit should be
It is an incredible
there are bonus points for it still being basketball. And I'm going to say, for proving Wikipedia wrong, Diaz, I submit to you, I think you need to get on that Wikipedia article.
I really need to write a letter to the editor, like, Mr. Wikipedia, you are so gravely wrong.
You could rewrite that Wikipedia article. This is how we get published.
So I'll use our episode as, like, the footnote, like, while common conception is that water basketball was invented in the Netherlands, as proven on Remember That Guy, and then Remember That Guy gets its own Wikipedia page.
We're a red link for a little bit, but you know what? Every Wikipedia page starts as a red link.
I mean, we could make our own Wikipedia page if we wanted to. There's enough content that we have out there that we could just make one.
But water basketball has already passed that bar, and we're just merely editing the facts and setting the record straight. Yeah, I mean, here would be my case for Tom Robinson as the everyman. He reaches the heights of his profession as both Dick Pope and Greg Louganis did. And certainly Greg Louganis did a lot of advocacy for a lot of good causes. But when it comes to the pure advocacy of their sport and getting the most people involved in it as possible, I mean, if we factor in the students, like, it's easily over 100,000 people that know how to swim because of him.
Well, and then you think about the people they taught how to swim and the people they taught how to swim. And I will say, look, as a lifeguard, a lot of respect for the lifeguard lineage that he had there. Here's my 2 cents real quick for Greg Louganis. I think that he, in many ways, is the obvious choice because I think he's the only person that would ever pass a bar test of these three. But also, if one of the two of you is not immediately excited about my guys, I've learned my lesson and they simply will not get in. So I'm not going to waste any energy on that.
No, don't do that. Don't be like that.
No,
James. Always be a zealous advocate. Here. Like, I'll still be a zealous advocate for Dick Pope because he inspired the entirety of the continent of Europe and a lot of America to start water skiing.
There's a part where I'm almost frustrated that Dick Pope has made all of these people living in arid region where they're definitely redirecting water that should be going to better uses for their own recreational uses because of him.
No, they just come to Florida. You want to know where the last couple U.S. water skiing championships have alternated between?
Middle River,
Florida, West Palm Beach, and Mays, Kansas. Which is outside of Wichita.
Okay.
Where they have a specific water ski course.
Also, is it spelled Mays with an I?
Yes.
It's in Corn, Kansas. You're telling me that they do it in fucking Corn, Kansas?
In Corn, Kansas, James.
Bullshit.
And it's all thanks to Dick Pope. I will show you what it looks like.
This is a negative point in Dick Pope's favor.
You still need to see it, though. It's fine.
I mean, the biggest positive that Dick Pope has going for him is that his name is Dick Pope.
Yeah, he is the papal penis. You like that, Xavier? You're not going to give me an out loud chuckle? You're just going to smile at papal penis?
It's good. All right, James, please look at what I just sent in the group chat.
This is going to make me really mad about water usage, isn't it?
To be fair, they get to just use the same water over and over again. They don't have to they don't have to change it.
That's so dumb. That's so dumb. That's so dumb looking.
Do you see what's about 100 yards north of it? The Kansas International Dragway. So in the space of about 200 yards, they have a water ski course and a drag strip.
Do you want to come see sports that take up land in just the most inconvenient ways possible? Come outside to Corn, Kansas, baby.
Right outside of Wichita.
All right, well, shifting from Corn, Kansas, back to the Hall. I mean, if it's between Dick Pope and Tom Robinson, I think I'm going to go Tom Robinson. I think Greg Louganis is great. Greg Louganis, also, I'm going to say, still hot. Still honestly could sell a lot of Speedos, probably. Dude has stayed in phenomenal shape. A lot of this came from a 2016 ESPN The Body issue, so he was doing the same nude shots as everyone else, except while diving. Dude rips ass. I I'm a sucker for anyone that talks about sport as performance and as entertainment. I loved hearing about how like he and Coach Ron O'Brien, he was so much better than everyone else. And because he wasn't like a competition-minded athlete in the same way as everyone else, they had to like make games about how he can hit certain scores in order to still kind of keep him engaged with it. So just like having to lean into that idea of sport as a kind of performance art and sport as something beyond just pure athletic achievement, but how to make art out of that athletic skill is very, very appealing to me. And I enjoyed watching a lot of Greg Louganis dives. Man, diving highlights are great because every dive's like 5 seconds at most. Such an easy thing to watch highlights for.
It's the ADHD sport.
Greg Louganis' 20-year career highlight tape is like 5 minutes.
No, I like Tom Robinson. And I like Diaz's commitment to basketball in all forms, even forms that people have never heard of. I do want to say one last thing about Dick Pope because I think it'll make James mad. There are reports that Dick Pope is essentially the reason why Disney World exists in Central Florida.
Neutral. Disney World's fine.
The Pope family and their promotion of Cypress Gardens and tourism to Central Florida is what convinced Walt Disney to put Disney World there.
Yeah, so all right, so here's how we'll finish it up. Dick Pope, I'm disqualifying for being too much of a ruthless capitalist. I am voted for Greg Louganis. Let's go ahead and give the honors to Tom Robinson. I know how this goes. It's not the same, but it rhymes.
Look, I know Xavier said Greg Louganis doesn't pass the babe thing, but like for me, like it is, if you say dive and you're like, oh yeah, Greg Louganis.
I'm just saying there's one person here that someone at a bar might have heard of.
No, that's totally fair. But the sports, at least, I would say. You know, Dick Pope is inseparable from water skiing, and Tom Robinson is inseparable from the pool in general, in all forms, no matter what skill level you have. If you're just learning how to not drown, or if you're competing for Olympic gold and you're setting world records, Tom Robinson is going to turn you into the best swimmer that you can be. That is why Tom Robinson, especially for his advocacy with the Red Cross and just his general love of all things swimming and making sure that people are safe when in bodies of water, we have no choice this week but to recognize the man with the least exciting name of our nominees this week, but the man who shall now not need to haunt me and can live forever in the hall. Tom Robinson, welcome to the Hall of Guy.
Oh, great. Now the hall's haunted instead.
He's satisfied. He's made his peace now that he is
this was his unfinished business.
3 Hall of Fames and 1 Hall of Guy.
Well, there we go. That takes the sting off a little bit. I will do my very best next time to hit the moving target of what criteria it is we care about. That will not be next week. We will still, for the next couple weeks, have something out for you. There will be some interstitial episodes as one of the three of us goes on some international travel. You'll find out when one of the three of us isn't on episode next week who it is. But we will still have something for you. In the meantime, feel free to check out everything that we always have at bit.ly/rememberthatguy, all one word, all lowercase. We sure do appreciate it if you tell anybody to listen to the show. It's absolutely the best sports history podcast in the world. I don't know about enough other ones to say that that's not true. So fuck it, it's true now. In order to make that, though, there are some people that we have to thank. Those people include producer Craig and the coders behind him for that lovely theme music. They include my two buddies here. I always want to thank them. But most of all, we want to thank you, dear listener, for joining in and giving us a reason to do this. So we will, as I said, do something over the next couple weeks. You guys have anything to say until next time we gather?
U.S. hired Poch. Let's go.
It is a statement of intent, at least. Like, if you couldn't get Klopp, getting Poch is at least like, okay, you're taking this seriously. It's the same thing. He's not as good in respect to the men's game as Jill Ellis is in respect to the women's game, but it is still like about as good as we could have hoped.
I know you meant Emma Hayes, but I want to say
Emma Hayes, Jill Ellis.
To be fair,
no, don't finish that sentence, Diaz. Don't finish that sentence. We're cutting off the episode. I've been one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz, and gotta tell you, Paralympics right around the corner. I am feeling as American as Apple Guy.
What's like Chet Clover's coach approach as a locker room presence?
We've stuck to the roots the whole way. We still do the single digit, just like Al Golden started. You know, Temple has a proud tradition, and it is very important that every man that steps foot in this locker room recognizes that it's an honor to be a Temple Al. And there's nothing guaranteed every day. We're not the people who were wanted by other programs, but we're the people who came together and made the best of it. That's what Temple Tough's all about, and that's what we're here fighting for. By God, we're going to run through that wall, and the Temple Owls are going to be the best that they can be, because that's all that matters, boys. And that's who Chet Clover is.
I mean, probably better than Stan Drayton, so.
Well, and I also heard 9/11 references, so you're better than at least one NFL head coach.
We did. No, I'm not even going to say that.
Nope. There's no. Sean McDermott proved it. There is no good way to mention 9/11 in a speech.
No. There's no good way to mention any geopolitical conflicts in any speech. Kellen Winslow maybe came the closest, but even that was still not cool.